Hey, Bailey Station families, this is Miss Jones. I just wanted to do my weekly check-in with you. I wanted to do a follow-up. Last time I videoed you, I talked about kind of our vision here at Bailey Station for closing the gaps due to the pandemic and our students being out from March on. So we definitely had to have a plan of action. And just to give you a brief idea of what our teachers are doing, I don't know if you can see this, but when we were talking about unwrapping the standards, and making sure that we understand and we're clear, crystal clear on what every standard means, we are unwrapping them. And the teachers take this form right here and basically, here's the standard up here. This is an example of the work we're doing. They pull out the verbs that are in each standard, and then they talk about what knowledge or concept that they have to understand with each standard. And this is really cool. This is Webb's depth of knowledge. In other words, is this standard just requiring a student to recall? Is this standard requiring a student to analyze? Like, what level of demand of learning are we putting on our students with this particular standard? So you identify the DOK, we call that Webb's depth of knowledge, how much we're challenging our students. And then vocabulary and basically support that we use to teach that. All the things like anchor charts, games, computer programs, just basic good instruction. This is a plan of action for essential standard that we determined was a superhero standard, and this is the learning progression. So you can see it's a lot of work when you identify your essentials, because once you identify them, you've got to unwrap them. However, the work is so important because it ensures that we're going to make the task and activities match the rigor of that standard. So now we know our plan. How are we meeting the needs of our kids? One thing I want to make sure that you understand, that every single day in our school schedule, we have an intervention block built in. So way back in the day, what used to happen was if you wanted to work with a student or intervene with a student, a lot of times you pulled a student out of class and they worked with maybe a teacher assistant, or they went to into a tutoring situation in another classroom with a volunteer that we had, and they were missing core subjects. So what we did and the district came up with, which was just genius, is every day in our schedule, every grade level stops for 1 hour. It's called the intervention block. And what we do in that 1 hour is we meet the needs of the students where they are. And how do we know where they are? We use something called a universal screener. It's called Easy CBM. We also use something called STAR, but every student takes it 3 times a year, basically. Our STAR is 3 times a year. Our Easy CBM is 1 time a year unless we determine it's needed more for another student. But they're both great. The two of them are great benchmark assessments. And when I say benchmark assessments, what I'm saying is we want to assess quickly just to make sure our students are on target where they're supposed to be at that time of the year. And at that point, they're determined whether they're going to be something called a Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. Now, 80 to 85% of our students are Tier 1 that we serve here at Bailey Station. That means they are getting everything they need in that Gen Ed room in that Tier 1 instruction. They're understanding the concepts. They are having success with the concepts and the skills being presented by the teacher. And that's all they need because they're getting it. And like I said, that's the majority of our population. Then we have a category called Tier 2. And that's about 10 to 15% of our students. And what we're saying is, at that given time on the benchmark assessment, they are not where they need to be. And why is that important to teachers? We have to know where they are. We have to identify those 10 to 15% students. So when we work in our professional learning communities that I talked about earlier, teachers are sitting down with the admin team and we are saying, okay, who are Tier 1 kids? In that class, we identify them all. They're flying. They're doing fine. Who are Tier 2 kids? That's 10 to 15% of our students. Let's write their name down. I want to know who that student is. And then we have a tier 3, and that's about 3 to 5% of our students that need even more intervention. But once you identify who the kids are, now you know who your groups are. And so if you're tier 1, which is the majority of our kids, we know that tier 1 instruction in that gen ed room is perfect. So when that intervention block comes around, so let's say we're talking about first grade, and at 1 o'clock, they have to do a 1 to 2 o'clock intervention block. That teacher is going to do one of two things. She's going to possibly reteach a skill that students struggled on. She's going to provide enrichment to students that are in that tier 1 category that are mastering the skills with that great classroom instruction, and they don't need any more support. So we still got to meet their needs. They need for being pushed. They need a need for being challenged more. We extend them. But if you're tier 2, you've identified in your benchmark assessment where your kids are, what the deficit areas are, and you're going to work in something we call small groups. I'm going to pull those 3 kids that came up tier 2, and I'm going to say, come sit with me at this small group table. I've got the rest of my kids, my tier 1 kids, I've got them working independently on an extension activity. And I'm going to be working with this small group at a small group table, and I'm going to say, okay, the 3 of you, I noticed that you struggled with theme, identifying the theme of a story. We're going to work on that so that you can master that. And we call that small group instruction. If you're a tier 3 student, you may even be leaving the classroom to get even more time and more support during that intervention block. So you're not missing anything. Remember, everybody's stopping on that grade level to get what they need. That's the beauty of an intervention. They go and they get it in even a smaller group of instruction with kids that are struggling as well in the same areas, and an interventionist can work with them. So when you have this beautiful plan in place, everybody's needs are being met. You're assessing them with the benchmark assessment. You're carving out an hour a day for intervention, and you're using your benchmark assessment results to drive your intervention. If they're struggling in math, small group math. If they're struggling in reading, small group instruction in reading. If they need intervention as far as like enrichment, you provide the enrichment. It's a beautiful plan because you can really concentrate on the needs of the students and use that time where that classroom teacher can meet the needs of everyone in her room. And we use resources outside the classroom, such as an interventionist, to meet the needs of those that need even more time. So it's important to me that you understand the process of how these things work in our building. How are we addressing the needs? You can't just, when you and I were in school, or maybe it was when I was in school, we started at the front of a textbook, page 1. We went through 475. You got it or you didn't get it. There was no benchmark assessment to see if I'm on the path of learning I need to be on. That's why we do frequent benchmarks. That's why we do frequent CFAs, common formative assessments, to make sure that our students are understanding the material before we get to the test, the summative, and figure out they're failing. We've got to be proactive in the process. So from this video, if you get nothing else, what you're going to get from this is, when I talked about unwrapping the videos, the standards, the essential standards, this is kind of what it looks like. And this is just one standard. This is the work a professional learning community does, a group of teachers does for one standard, one essential. Why is this important? It's important because they have to understand the rigor of the standards so that they're not having their kids do busy work. So they're not having their kids do something that's not meaningful. It's got to be meaningful if we want to grow students. And remember, that's where we have to work at Bailey Station, growing our high-performing students, growing our lower-performing students. Second of all, I talked to you about the intervention block. We stop an hour a day in every grade level, and we meet our kids based on benchmark assessment results. Most of those kids are tier 1, 80 to 85%. But we do have some kids that need more specific intervention, and that's about 10 to 15%. That's tier 2 kids. And then tier 3, they may even leave the room for more intense intervention. But the most important thing is, no one's glazing over anything. We're hitting it hard. We're identifying deficit areas every single day in this building. We don't do it once a week. We do it every day. That's what the intervention piece is. So hopefully you have a little bit of an understanding, of more what goes on as far as instruction, so that you can feel good and know that our teachers are doing what they need to do to meet the needs of your kids. I want to address another thing real quickly and just say one more time that things are so great in the building. Our CVA teachers are working so well with their students. It's a learning curve. There's going to be mistakes, and it's not easy. And I know it's not easy for our CVA students, and there's challenges in the building because you can imagine being in mask and, taking breaks here and there, but nothing looks the same right now. But I'll tell you this, it's all in our mindset. I say this every time. We're going to be positive, and we're going to let our kids know this is a blip of time. Like I said before, this is a phase. We're going to get through this because we've got dynamite people and dynamite parents to get through this. So just coming to you to let you know kind of where we are and how we address the needs of students at Bailey Station. I'm going to be coming to you again next week. I even may have one of my APs come and talk to you about spelling. Because, we've gotten away from 20 words, like we used to do. You memorize the 20 words, and really that's kind of all you do. And you don't memorize, you teach those words in isolation, and you really don't teach them within the text, complex text. So we did away with those spelling tests. Number 1, John. Number 2, dog. Number 3, whatever it was. We've gotten away with that. So it's important, how do we teach spelling? Spelling's critical. It's critical to writing. So I'm gonna send you something that's gonna explain that. Just remember, I'm always here. I'm here for you, and I'm here for your kids, and I sure do love them all. Every one of them that's in CVA, and every one of them that's in this building. Have a great day.